My brother's smug voice cut through the clinking of glasses at our Easter dinner table. Not everyone can handle a real career in tech, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. His gaze locked on me, daring me to react, while the room filled with nods and stifled chuckles. Heat crawled up my neck, the familiar sting of being the family disappointment pressing down on me. And then silence. My 83-year-old grandmother set down her fork, eyes sharp as ever. With one question, she would dismantle his carefully polished image in front of everyone. If you've ever been underestimated or betrayed by family, subscribe right now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your story deserves to be heard. Trust me when I say that the validation from strangers who understand can sometimes heal wounds that family creates. Unlike my brother Mark, who took the traditional route, computer science degree, fancy Silicon Valley address, corporate ladder climbing, I started coding at night while working retail during the day. I learned by doing, by failing, by fixing, by trying again. Not the kind of origin story that impresses people at cocktail parties. Our family dynamic has always been clear. Mark was the real tech success, while my business was treated like a cute side project that would eventually fail. Mom would pat my hand at family gatherings and ask, "Still doing that computer thing?" while she'd proudly announce Mark's latest promotion to anyone who would listen. Easter has always been the unofficial family status update in our house. The smell of Mom's glazed ham filled the dining room, mixing with the scent of fresh lilies on the table. Dad's signature cocktails, something with bourbon and orange bitters, clinked in crystal glasses as everyone settled in for the inevitable "So how's work going?" questions around the table. When Mark's turn came, he straightened his designer shirt collar and launched into his rehearsed speech about his recent promotion at Tech Fusion. The chandelier light caught his expensive watch as he gestured, describing his team of developers and dropping tech jargon that made our relatives' eyes glaze over with impressed confusion. "The tech industry is brutal these days," he announced, swirling his wine in a glass that probably cost more than my first laptop. "Not everyone can handle a real career in tech. You need formal education, connections, and frankly, a certain mindset for it." His eyes flicked to me with that familiar look, the one that said, "We both know you're playing pretend in my world." My fork stabbed into the honey-glazed carrot on my plate with more force than necessary. I could taste bitter resentment mixing with the sweetness of the vegetable. Aunt Debbie, always trying to include everyone, jumped in. "Sophia does computer stuff too, right?" Mark actually chuckled, a sound that felt like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. Sophia's little project is more like digital arts and crafts compared to enterprise development. The table went quiet as everyone suddenly became very interested in their asparagus, avoiding my eyes completely. The only sound was silverware clinking against china plates and the distant hum of the kitchen exhaust fan. This wasn't new territory. At Thanksgiving, Mark had helpfully explained to our cousins that my business model was unsustainable, while I sat silently seething, the taste of pumpkin pie turning to ash in my mouth. As the ham was passed around for seconds, its sweet glaze glistening under the dining room lights, Mark continued, "Real tech means building solutions that transform industries, not just making little apps. It's why degrees from places like Stanford matter." Uncle Rob nodded sagely, his balding head reflecting the light fixtures above. "That's why Mark drives a Tesla and buys those fancy wines. The big leagues pay differently." I could feel my cheeks burning, matching the color of the cranberry sauce on the table. 8 years of grinding, of sleepless nights, of risking everything I had reduced to making little apps. When Mom asked about my recent business trip to Tokyo, Mark interrupted before I could answer. "Sophia's more on the administrative side of tech. She manages freelancers who do the actual programming." I felt my face burning as I gripped my napkin under the table so hard my knuckles turned white. I'd written every line of our core software myself, debugging until 4 a.m. more nights than I could count. But I'd long ago stopped correcting him at family gatherings. It only made me look defensive, and Mark somehow always came out looking like the gracious expert. By dessert, Mom's famous lemon meringue pie, its peaks golden brown and perfect. Mark was advising our teenage cousin about the proper path into tech. Start with the fundamentals, then get into a top program. Not everyone has what it takes. The worst part was watching my parents beam with pride at Mark while giving me sympathetic glances, the kind reserved for the family underachiever. Dad topped off Mark's wine glass first, always first. What no one at that table knew, except for Grandma, was that my little project had just completed its biggest acquisition to date. For the past 6 months, I'd been in confidential negotiations to purchase Tech Fusion's struggling enterprise division. Yes, the exact division where Mark worked. The heavy wooden conference table where we'd finalized the deal still felt surreal. The paperwork had been signed Friday afternoon with a press embargo until Monday morning's official announcement. The weight of the pen in my hand as I signed my name had felt significant, life-changing. Only Grandma knew, because she'd been my silent supporter from day one. The only family member who'd actually taken time to understand what my company did. She'd visited my first tiny office when everyone else was too busy attending Mark's housewarming at his Silicon Valley condo. She'd helped me practice my negotiation tactics, sitting across from me at her kitchen table, the smell of her famous cinnamon tea between us. We'd celebrated with a private champagne toast the night before Easter when the deal was finally signed, the bubbles tickling my nose as we clinked glasses in her living room, away from judgmental eyes. "To knowing your worth," she'd said, her eyes crinkling at the corners, even when others don't see it yet. Throughout dinner, I noticed Grandma checking her vintage wristwatch repeatedly, her eyes twinkling whenever they met mine. The antique timepiece had been my grandfather's, and she never took it off. Its soft ticking was barely audible over the dinner conversation. "Mark," she suddenly interrupted as he explained blockchain to my bewildered father, whose eyes had glazed over 2 minutes in. "Which division of Tech Fusion did you say you work in again?" "Enterprise Solutions," he answered proudly, chest puffing out slightly. "We're the backbone of the company's revenue stream." Grandma nodded thoughtfully, reaching for her water glass with a hand slightly trembling with age but eyes sharp as ever. "Fascinating. And how's morale there lately? I read something about restructuring." Mark's confidence faltered slightly, so slightly only someone looking for it would notice. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. "Just rumors. Nothing official. We're too valuable to touch." "Interesting," Grandma murmured, glancing at her watch again. I could see the second hand ticking closer to 6 p.m. "Sophia, didn't you mention something about that sector recently?" My brother laughed dismissively, the sound echoing off the dining room walls. "Grandma, Sophia's company is a completely different space. She wouldn't have any visibility into enterprise-level operations." I felt a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips as I took a sip of water to hide it. The ice clinked against the glass, suddenly sounding very loud to my ears. As Mom's homemade chocolate mousse was served in crystal dessert cups, Grandma caught my eye and raised a perfectly penciled eyebrow. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed softly. It was 6 p.m., the embargo had just lifted. The chocolate was rich on my tongue, but anticipation was sweeter. After years of dismissal, of patronizing pats on the head, of "that's nice dear" responses to my business milestones, everything was about to change. Grandma set down her dessert spoon with deliberate precision. The tiny clink against the china seemed to echo in what suddenly felt like a very quiet room. "Mark, you mentioned not everyone can handle a real career in tech. I'm curious what you mean by that." Mark launched into his practice speech about education, corporate experience, and technical expertise, gesturing with his dessert spoon for emphasis. Chocolate mousse threatened to fly off the spoon as he waved it around. "So success in tech is measured by what, exactly?" Grandma pressed, leaning forward slightly. "Stock options? Acquisition potential? Valuation?" "All of the above," Mark answered confidently, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. "It's about building something valuable enough that major players want to acquire you, or being at those major players making those decisions." Grandma smiled and turned to me, her eyes dancing with mischief. "Sophia, is that why your company just bought his?" The clatter of a dropped spoon echoed in the sudden silence. Uncle Rob's mouth hung open, a bit of chocolate visible on his front tooth. "What?" Mark's voice cracked as he pulled out his phone, frantically searching for news. The blue light from the screen illuminated his suddenly pale face. I cleared my throat, aware of every eye at the table turning to me in shock. SupplyStream finalized the acquisition of Tech Fusion's Enterprise Solutions division on Friday. The press release went live at 6 p.m. tonight. That's my division," Mark stammered, finding the announcement with my name and photo prominently featured at the top of TechCrunch. "Yes," I said quietly, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "And effective tomorrow morning, your team reports to my VP of Operations, who's been reviewing performance metrics for weeks." Mom's wine glass froze halfway to her lips, the red liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "You bought Mark's company?" "The underperforming division," I corrected, feeling oddly calm. "We're keeping most of the engineering talent but restructuring leadership." Uncle Rob choked on his pie as realization dawned. "Wait, Mark now works for Sophia?" The room erupted in a chaos of questions, the words tumbling over each other like a digital traffic jam. Dad's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally something that looked like amazement. "How big is your company?" Aunt Debbie asked, her voice higher than usual. When did this happen? Mom demanded, looking between Mark and me like she was watching a tennis match. What exactly does Supply Stream do? Dad asked, really asked for the first time. Mark sat frozen, his phone still in his hand, screen showing my company logo next to Tech Fusions. I explained how my little project had grown to 230 employees across 3 countries, how our supply chain management software was used by 6 Fortune 500 companies, how our valuation had hit $500 million in the last funding round. But you never talk about any of this, Mom said, her voice small and confused, wine glass now firmly back on the table. I tried, I said simply, for years. The rest of dinner passed in stunned conversation, as relatives suddenly had dozens of questions about my company, its size, funding, and why they'd never understood what I actually did. Grandma sat back, sipping her after-dinner tea, looking like the cat that got the cream. Mark left early, mumbling about needing to prepare for tomorrow, his Tesla peeling out of the driveway with uncharacteristic speed. The sound of tires on gravel faded quickly into the evening air. Dad pulled me aside as I was helping clear the table, the dishes stacked in his hands forgotten. His eyes were wet behind his glasses. I never understood your business. I'm sorry we didn't give you the same support we gave Mark. The china clinked as I set down the plates I was carrying. It's okay, Dad. Not everyone gets what I do. That's why I stopped trying to explain it. No, he said firmly, putting his free hand on my shoulder. It's not okay. We should have tried harder. I should have tried harder. Driving home that night, the streetlights casting rhythmic patterns across my dashboard, I realized I no longer needed the validation I'd been seeking from my family. The success spoke for itself. The weight I'd been carrying, proving myself worthy of their attention, their respect, seemed to lift with each mile. Monday morning, the familiar scent of premium coffee filled my corner office as I arrived early to prepare for the transition meetings. The morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the city skyline below. Mark was waiting in my office when I arrived, sitting stiffly in one of the leather chairs across from my desk. He stood when I entered, his normally perfect hair slightly disheveled. I had no idea, he said quietly, his voice lacking its usual confidence. All this time I thought you were just... He couldn't finish the sentence. Playing at tech? I offered, setting my bag down on my desk. The surface was clear except for 3 monitors and a small jade plant Grandma had given me when I signed my first major client. He nodded, looking at the floor, then around at my office, bigger than his, with better views in a building with our company name on it. The funny thing about real success, Mark, it doesn't need constant announcement. He winced at his own words being turned back on him. So what happens now? He asked, fingers fidgeting with his watch, the expensive one he'd made sure everyone noticed at dinner. That depends on you, I said, sitting down behind my desk. Your technical skills are solid. Your management style needs work. The question is whether you can adapt. For the first time in our adult lives, Mark looked at me, really looked at me, as an equal, maybe even as someone he could learn from. Sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones closest to you, the ones who should believe in you first. It's a special kind of pain, but it can also fuel a special kind of determination. If you've ever had to prove your worth to those who doubted you, hit subscribe and share your story in the comments. You are not alone. There's an entire community here who understands what it feels like to work in the shadows of someone else's spotlight. The sweetest success isn't just proving others wrong, it's creating something valuable enough that even your critics can't deny it. It's not about the moment of vindication, satisfying as that might be. It's about building something that matters, that lasts. In the months since that Easter dinner, Mark and I have found a new relationship, as colleagues first, then slowly rebuilding as siblings. He's still learning to listen more than he speaks. I'm still learning to speak up more often. And Grandma, she just smiles that knowing smile, the one that says she saw it all along. The one that reminds me that sometimes the right person believing in you is enough until the world catches up. Next week, I'll share how my brother and I navigated our new professional relationship and the unexpected ways it healed our personal one. Because sometimes the most profound changes come when we least expect them. Over Easter dinner with family watching and the taste of lemon meringue pie still sweet on our tongues.